The new waiter. Michael stood outside the Grand Hotel, his heart racing beneath his cool exterior. The elegant facade of the building loomed before him, hiding the shadows of its dark secrets. This was no ordinary job for Michael. He wasn't just another waiter looking for work. He had a mission. His agency had tasked him with infiltrating the hotel to investigate rumors of illegal activities. Somewhere within these walls, a powerful criminal network was operating, and he was here to bring them down. He straightened his uniform, trying to blend into the image of a lowly hotel staff member. Inside, the hotel bustled with life. Guests mingled, staff hurried about, and the scent of freshly prepared food wafted from the kitchen. Michael pushed open the door and entered the world he was about to immerse himself in. The first few days went by without much incident. He observed the flow of the staff, noted how certain high-profile guests seemed to receive special attention, and caught snippets of conversations that raised more questions than answers, but nothing concrete. His job was to remain invisible while learning everything he could about the operations here. It wasn't until his third day that he met her, Jenny, the head chef. She was a force of nature in the kitchen, commanding the staff with precision and ease. She seemed so at home in the chaos, turning out dish after dish with the expertise of someone who had worked in kitchens all her life. Her fiery attitude didn't go unnoticed, especially by Michael. "Hey, new guy," Jenny called out as he passed by the kitchen doors. "You think you can handle more than just carrying trays? We could use an extra set of hands in here?" Michael hesitated, unsure if stepping into the kitchen was a good idea. He had to maintain his cover, stay unnoticed. But then again, getting closer to the staff might give him access to more information. "Sure," he replied, stepping inside. The heat from the ovens hit him immediately, but he kept his focus. Jenny gave him a quick rundown, her voice sharp and authoritative. But there was a hint of warmth in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. As the night went on, Michael found himself working alongside Jenny, helping where he could. Their conversations were brief, mostly about food and the hotel, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her. She wasn't just a chef. There was something beneath the surface, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. By the end of the night, Jenny looked over at him and smiled, a rare sight from her. "Not bad for a waiter," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Michael chuckled, feeling an unexpected sense of ease around her. "Not bad for a chef," he quipped back, earning a laugh from her. He walked back to his room that night, his mind swirling with questions. Jenny was a mystery, one he couldn't quite solve. But as much as he wanted to stay focused on his mission, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. Something about her captivated him, and he couldn't afford distractions. But distractions were exactly what he was getting. Over the next few days, he found himself spending more time in the kitchen, helping out where he could and exchanging banter with Jenny. Each day, the line between his mission and his growing interest in her blurred a little more. He knew he had to stay focused. The hotel was hiding something big, and he was getting closer to finding out what it was. But every time he looked at Jenny, he couldn't help but wonder if he was getting in too deep. And somewhere in the background, the wheels of a much darker operation were turning, one that neither Michael nor Jenny had fully realized they were both a part of. Unlikely connection days passed, and Michael's routine settled into the rhythm of the hotel. His role as a waiter gave him an excuse to move around freely, observe, and listen. Every now and then, he'd catch a glimpse of something out of place. Whispers exchanged in the back rooms, late-night deliveries that didn't show up on any official records. He was getting closer to the truth, but nothing seemed to point to the core of the operation. And then there was Jenny. Their conversations had become a regular part of his day. Every time he passed through the kitchen, they exchanged quick words, half-jokes, and subtle glances that left him thinking long after he left the room. She seemed to sense something in him too, though neither of them acknowledged it. They were both professionals, focused, driven. But even the most focused can be distracted. One evening, after most of the guests had cleared out and the kitchen had started to quiet down, Jenny invited him to sit for a moment. "Take a break, new guy," she said, sliding a plate of freshly made pasta across the counter toward him. "You've been running around like a headless chicken all day." Michael smiled, grateful for the excuse to sit. The tension of his mission weighed on him more each day, and moments like this, away from the watchful eyes of his superiors, felt like brief escapes. He took a bite of the pasta. It was incredible, bursting with flavor. "Wow," he said between bites. "You made this?" Jenny shrugged. "I do what I can. Cooking's my life. I've been at it since I could walk, pretty much." There was a pause, as if she wanted to say more, but held back. Michael sensed there was a story behind her words, but he wasn't here to pry into her personal life. Still, something about the vulnerability in her eyes made him want to know more. "Why a hotel like this?" Michael asked, trying to steer the conversation. "You could work anywhere with your talent." Jenny smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Let's just say I have my reasons." There it was again, that air of mystery. She was hiding something, but Michael couldn't tell if it was related to the illegal activities he was investigating or something else entirely. He pushed the thought aside, reminding himself to stay focused. "What about you, huh?" Jenny asked, turning the conversation back to him. "You don't exactly seem like a career waiter to me." Michael chuckled, though the question hit closer to home than she realized. "Let's just say I'm in between jobs," he said, keeping his tone light. "Figured I'd try something new." Jenny studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if she could see through the lie. But she didn't press further. Instead, she nodded and stood, clearing the plate in front of him. "Well, whatever brought you here," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm glad you ended up in my kitchen. You're not bad company." Michael wasn't sure how to respond to that. He felt the pull between them growing stronger with each passing day, and it was becoming harder to ignore. But getting close to anyone here, especially someone like Jenny, was dangerous. He was walking a fine line between his mission and his personal feelings, and one wrong step could jeopardize everything. That night, after his shift ended, Michael took a detour through the hotel's back corridors. He had memorized the layout of the building by now and knew which areas were off-limits to most staff. He needed to dig deeper, find more proof of the illegal operations that were undoubtedly taking place under the surface. As he approached the loading dock, he heard voices, low, urgent. Michael ducked into the shadows, straining to listen. Two men were arguing about a shipment, something about it being delayed. Michael's heart raced as he caught the tail end of their conversation. "Tell Jenny we can't afford any more mistakes," one of the men hissed. "We're already behind schedule." Michael froze. "Jenny?" He leaned closer, trying to hear more, but the conversation ended abruptly as the men parted ways. He waited until they were gone before slipping back into the hallway, his mind spinning. Why would they mention Jenny in connection with something so suspicious? Could it be a misunderstanding? Or was she involved in something darker than he'd imagined? As he made his way back to his room, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. His mission had just taken a dangerous turn, and the woman he was beginning to care about might be more involved in it than he ever anticipated. Suspicion grows. The next morning, Michael couldn't get the conversation he'd overheard out of his mind. "Tell Jenny we can't afford any more mistakes." The words echoed in his thoughts as he moved through his day, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Jenny, bright, charismatic, seemingly untouchable Jenny, was somehow connected to the shady dealings happening at the hotel. It didn't add up. She had the air of someone deeply dedicated to her craft, a person who loved her kitchen and her food. But now Michael had to consider the possibility that she wasn't just a chef. She might be part of the very criminal network he was sent to investigate. But how much did she know? Was she a minor player, dragged into something beyond her control, or was she actively involved in running the whole operation? Michael's mind raced as he went through the motions of his waiter duties, all the while keeping an eye on Jenny. Over the next few days, he watched her more closely, trying to catch any signs that might confirm his suspicions. She seemed completely normal. No suspicious behavior, no strange conversations, just the usual bustling activity in the kitchen. But now, every smile she flashed his way, every light-hearted joke carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He wasn't sure whether to confront her or continue investigating quietly. One evening, Michael found himself on an unusually quiet shift. The hotel had fewer guests than normal, giving him more freedom to slip away unnoticed. He took the opportunity to explore the back areas of the hotel once again, hoping to find more clues to connect Jenny to the illegal activities. The loading dock was empty when he arrived. The place where he'd overheard the men talking about Jenny felt eerily quiet now. Michael scanned the area, checking for anything out of place, when he noticed a large, unmarked crate pushed up against the wall. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding as he glanced around to make sure no one was watching. The crate was sealed, but the top was loose, as though someone hadn't finished closing it properly. Michael tugged at the lid, and it slid off with surprising ease. Inside were various items, neatly packaged, but nothing immediately recognizable. He pulled one of the boxes out, his breath catching when he saw the contents: illegal firearms, often hidden away like regular hotel supplies. Michael's hands shook as he quickly replaced the lid and stepped back. This was the proof he needed. The hotel was definitely involved in smuggling illegal goods. But where did Jenny fit in? Was she a pawn? Or was she orchestrating these shipments from behind the scenes? He returned to his room, his mind racing. He wanted to believe that Jenny had no part in this, but the evidence was stacking up against her. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how dangerous this entire operation really was. He needed to get a message to his superiors, to warn them that things were escalating quickly. But that night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Jenny. Her laugh, the way her eyes sparkled when they shared a joke in the kitchen. Could someone like her really be involved in such a dangerous game? And if she was, what did that mean for them? The next day, Michael tried to keep his distance from her. He focused on his work, avoided lingering in the kitchen, and kept his interactions with her brief. But Jenny noticed the change in his behavior almost immediately. "Hey," she said, cornering him during a slow moment. "What's going on with you lately? You've been acting weird." Michael forced a smile, trying to act casual. "Just tired, I guess. These long shifts are catching up to me." Jenny narrowed her eyes, clearly not convinced. "You sure? It's not like you to be so distant." His heart pounded in his chest. Was she on to him? Did she suspect he knew something? Michael struggled to keep his cool, but the weight of the secret between them felt heavier than ever. "Yeah, I'm fine," he lied, avoiding her gaze. "Don't worry about it." Jenny studied him for a moment longer, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read his thoughts. Then with a sigh, she nodded and let it go. But the tension between them lingered, thick and unspoken. As the evening wore on, Michael knew one thing for certain. He was running out of time. He had to find out the truth about Jenny before it was too late. And with each passing day, the lines between his mission and his personal feelings blurred even more. Unseen threads. The atmosphere in the hotel shifted after that day. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was getting closer to the truth. But the closer he got, the more dangerous it became. His suspicion about Jenny weighed on him heavily, and it was taking its toll. He avoided her whenever possible, keeping interactions short and professional. Still, There was an undeniable pull toward her, even as he tried to distance himself. One afternoon, while on his break, Michael sat in the staff room going over everything he had uncovered so far. The shipment, the conversations, the shady guests. It all painted a clear picture of the illegal operations happening under the hotel's glamorous surface. But Jenny remained a mystery. She didn't fit the mold of a criminal mastermind, yet he couldn't ignore the possibility that she was more deeply involved than he wanted to admit. As Michael mulled over his next steps, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his superior urging him to push forward with the investigation. Time was running out, and they needed more concrete evidence to take down the operation. Michael sighed, knowing the pressure was mounting. He had to keep his focus on the mission, no matter how complicated things had become. Later that evening, Michael was called to serve a private event for a group of high-profile guests. The room was filled with the hotel's most frequent visitors, some of whom Michael had already flagged as potential suspects. He moved quietly between tables, listening for anything suspicious. As the night went on, he noticed a familiar figure enter the room. Jenny. She wasn't there to cook tonight. She was dressed impeccably, her usual chef's coat replaced by a sleek black dress. It was jarring to see her outside the kitchen, mingling with the hotel's elite guests. She moved effortlessly between conversations, laughing and talking with a confidence Michael hadn't seen before. Something about her presence at this event felt wrong. Why was she here, rubbing elbows with the very people Michael was investigating? His heart raced as he watched her from the corner of the room, careful not to draw attention to himself. Could this be the moment where everything fell into place? As the night drew to a close, Michael noticed one of the guests approach Jenny, handing her a small, discreet envelope. She took it without hesitation, slipping it into her bag before continuing her conversation as though nothing had happened. Michael's mind raced. That envelope could be the key to everything. He needed to find out what was inside, but he couldn't risk blowing his cover. Not yet. He decided to wait and observe, hoping for another opportunity to arise. As he returned to his duties, Jenny caught his eye from across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but for a brief moment, Michael felt a flicker of something. Trust, perhaps, or maybe just recognition of the connection they shared. But then she turned away, leaving him with more questions than answers. The more Michael thought about it, the more he realized just how deep Jenny might be in this. He couldn't afford to ignore the signs any longer. He was getting closer to unraveling the truth, but he feared what that truth might mean. For both of them. Fractured trust. The tension in the hotel grew as Michael delved deeper into his investigation. Every interaction felt charged, particularly with Jenny. He tried to convince himself that keeping his distance was necessary, but the more he saw her, the harder it became. The following days were a blur of serving guests and dodging inquiries from his superiors. He stayed vigilant, waiting for another chance to uncover what was in that envelope Jenny received. His instincts told him it held vital information, but the longer he waited, the more anxious he became. One evening, during another slow shift, Michael found Jenny in the kitchen, her expression thoughtful as she prepared a new dish. The aroma of spices filled the air, a warm contrast to the cold reality of his thoughts. Unable to resist, he approached her, trying to keep his tone light. "What's cooking, chef?" She glanced up, her eyes brightening at his presence. "Just experimenting with flavors. Care to taste?" Michael nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in his stomach. As she handed him a small sample, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through him. "Wow, this is amazing," he said, trying to maintain a casual demeanor. "Thanks. It's a new recipe I'm working on for an upcoming event," Jenny replied, a proud smile on her face. But there was something else beneath her enthusiasm, a hint of vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. "Are you excited about the event?" he asked, genuinely curious. Jenny hesitated. "Yeah, I guess. Just a lot riding on it." Her words hit him hard, a reminder that she had her own pressures. Michael wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but he held back. The truth about her life might be too heavy to bear. Instead, he took a step back, realizing he was losing sight of his objective. Later that night, as he finished his shift, he made a decision. He had to follow Jenny after her work. He needed to see where she went and what she was up to. With a sense of determination, he waited until she left the hotel. Michael followed her at a distance, careful to stay out of sight. She walked through the bustling streets, her demeanor confident and purposeful. His heart raced as he considered what he might discover. Would he finally uncover her secrets, or would he find something that shattered everything he thought he knew? As Jenny entered a dimly lit bar, Michael hesitated at the door. The place was filled with an unsavory crowd, laughter mixed with the clinking of glasses. He stepped inside, blending into the shadows, trying to keep his distance. From his vantage point, he watched as Jenny spoke with a group of men, their body language suggesting familiarity and trust. Anxiety washed over him as he tried to piece together what was happening. They were close, exchanging whispers and knowing glances. Suddenly, one of the men pulled out a similar envelope to the one Jenny had received. Jenny leaned in, whispering something to one of the men that made him laugh. The connection between them felt undeniable. Had he misjudged her all along? Confusion gripped Michael. Did she have a deeper involvement in this operation than he'd ever imagined? Doubt seeped in, mingling with his growing feelings for her. He had to know the truth, but confronting her now felt impossible. Michael stepped back, his mind racing. He needed to figure out his next move. Did he confront her about what he had seen, or should he dig deeper and gather more evidence first? Either choice felt fraught with danger, not just for him, but for Jenny as well. Revelations. The following day was filled with a restless energy that left Michael on edge. He couldn't shake the images of Jenny mingling with those men at the bar, their laughter echoing in his mind like a haunting melody. He knew he needed answers, but how could he confront her without risking everything? As the afternoon shift began, the kitchen buzzed with activity. Michael kept his distance, focusing on his tasks but stealing glances at Jenny. She seemed focused, preparing dishes with an intensity that fascinated him. But there was an underlying tension in her movements, a sense of urgency he hadn't seen before. During a rare, quiet moment, Michael found himself alone with Jenny in the kitchen. "Hey, can we talk?" he asked, his heart racing. Jenny turned to him, her brow furrowing slightly. "Sure. What's up?" "I saw you at the bar last night," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "You seemed close with those guys." Her expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and something else that he couldn't quite place. "It's not what you think," she said quickly, her tone defensive. Michael hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Then what is it? I need to know what's going on." "They're just old acquaintances. Nothing more." "Old acquaintances?" Michael repeated, trying to gauge her reaction. "You seemed comfortable with them? Maybe too comfortable." "Michael, you don't understand," she replied, her voice rising slightly. "I'm trying to keep this place running, and sometimes I have to deal with people I don't want to." He could see the frustration etched on her face, but something in her eyes told him there was more to the story. "Are you in trouble? Is that why you're dealing with them?" She paused, her expression softening for just a moment before she hardened again. "I'm not in trouble, okay? I can handle myself. You just need to trust me." "I want to trust you, Jenny, but this place..." He gestured around the bustling kitchen. "It's not just a job for me. I need to know if you're involved in something dangerous." Jenny's expression shifted to one of uncertainty. "Michael, I swear I'm not. I'm just doing my job. But what if your job is part of something bigger? What if you're in over your head?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "Stop!" she snapped, her eyes flashing. "You don't know anything about my life. You're just some waiter playing detective. Michael recoiled slightly, hurt flashing through him. I'm trying to help you. I care about you, Jenny. At his admission, Jenny's expression faltered, and for a brief moment he saw the cracks in her tough exterior. But it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. I can take care of myself. I don't need your help. Before he could respond, she turned away, returning to her work. Michael felt a deep sense of loss, as if the connection they had been building had shattered in an instant. He wanted to reach out, to reassure her, but now he felt like an outsider looking in. As the shift continued, Michael's mind raced. He had to decide whether to trust her instincts or to dig deeper into the shadows surrounding the hotel. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. That evening, as Michael finished his shift, he made his way back to the loading dock, drawn to the crate he had discovered earlier. He needed to gather more evidence, to see if he could connect Jenny to the illegal shipments he suspected were tied to her. To his surprise, he found the crate open. As he peered inside, the firearms were gone, replaced by new boxes stacked neatly. Just then, a voice broke the silence. "What are you doing here?" A tall man with a menacing presence stepped into the dim light. Michael's heart raced. He recognized him from the bar, one of the men Jenny had been speaking with. "I was just—" he stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. "Just what?" the man interrupted, stepping closer. "You shouldn't be poking around here." Michael took a step back, knowing he was in over his head. Before he could finish, the man lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "You don't want to know what happens to people who get too curious." Fear gripped Michael, but he fought back. "Let go of me!" Suddenly, the door to the loading dock swung open and a figure stepped inside. It was Jenny. "Michael, what's going on?" she shouted, eyes wide with concern. The man released Michael, turning to face her. "Stay out of this, Jenny. It's none of your business." But it was too late. Crossroads. The atmosphere in the loading dock crackled with tension as Michael stood between Jenny and the imposing man. The realization of being caught in the middle of something far larger than he had anticipated hit him like a freight train. "Michael, are you okay?" Jenny asked, her voice a mix of concern and urgency. "I'm fine," he replied, "but we need to talk. Now's not the time," the man sneered, taking a step toward Jenny. "You shouldn't be here. This doesn't concern you." "Everything concerns me if it involves Michael," Jenny shot back, her defiance surprising even herself. "What's going on?" Michael's heart raced as he exchanged glances with her, silently pleading for her to understand the gravity of the situation. "Jenny, we can't ignore this," he said, desperate to connect the dots before it was too late. "Don't listen to him," the man interjected, his tone menacing. "He doesn't know what he's talking about. Just walk away, and this will all be over." "But what is this?" Jenny demanded, stepping closer to Michael, her eyes fierce. "What are you involved in?" Before Michael could respond, the man lunged forward, grabbing Jenny by the arm. "I said this doesn't concern you." Michael's instincts kicked in. "Let her go!" He shoved the man as he positioned himself protectively in front of Jenny. The man stumbled back, momentarily caught off guard. "You're making a mistake, kid," he snarled, his eyes flashing with anger. In that split second, Michael knew they were at a crossroads. He could either back down or fight for the truth, even if it meant putting himself and Jenny at risk. And he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "I'm not afraid of you," Michael said, trying to steady his voice. "But you should be afraid of what I'm about to expose." Jenny's expression shifted, a mix of worry and admiration flashing across her face. "Michael, please." "Just trust me," he urged her, not taking his eyes off the man. "I won't let anything happen to you," and for a moment the man hesitated, weighing his options. But then his expression hardened. "You think you're some kind of hero? You have no idea what you're dealing with." In a heartbeat, he lunged again, this time aiming for Michael. The world slowed as Michael reacted, ducking just in time to avoid the blow. But the man was quick, spinning around and grabbing Michael by the collar, slamming him against the crate. "Enough!" Jenny shouted, fear in her voice as she grabbed the man's arm. "Stop!" Michael pushed back, using every ounce of strength he had. "Get off me!" The man's grip faltered, and Michael broke free, turning to face him once more. "You're not going to intimidate us!" "You're in way over your head," the man warned, backing away slightly. "You don't know who you're messing with." With that, he turned and fled into the shadows, leaving Michael and Jenny breathless in the dim light of the loading dock. "What just happened?" Jenny asked, her voice shaky as she stepped closer to him. "Who was that guy?" "Someone who's part of the hotel's illegal operations," Michael replied, his mind racing. "I saw him at the bar with you." Jenny's eyes widened in realization. "So it's true. You've been investigating." "I had to," he admitted, his breath coming in heavy bursts. "I couldn't just ignore what I found." "But why didn't you come to me?" she demanded, frustration etched on her face. "I could have explained—" "Explained what?" Michael interrupted, his voice rising. "That you're involved in something dangerous? I care about you, Jenny. I didn't want to drag you into this." Silence stretched between them, the weight of their unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, neither of them knew how to bridge the growing chasm of doubt and fear. "Maybe it's time I told you everything," Jenny finally said, her voice quiet. "But we need to get out of here first." Michael nodded, realizing the urgency of the situation. "Let's go." They stepped out into the night, their hearts racing as they navigated the maze of corridors and hallways. Each step felt like a countdown, and they both knew they had to confront the truth, whatever that truth might be. As they reached the parking lot, Jenny hesitated. "Michael, I need you to promise me something. No matter what I say, you have to trust me." "Trust is hard right now," he replied, feeling the weight of her request. "But I'll do my best." Taking a deep breath, Jenny finally spoke. "I'm part of this operation, but I didn't choose it. It's complicated. I was pulled in against my will, and now I'm just trying to survive." Michael's heart sank. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. "So you are involved?" "Not how you think," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not the one in charge. I'm trying to get out, but it's not easy." Before he could respond, a car engine revved nearby, and their heads snapped toward the sound. The same men from the bar were approaching, their expressions grim. "Run!" Michael shouted, grabbing Jenny's hand as they sprinted across the lot, the gravity of their choices looming large behind them. Final confrontation. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed behind them as he pulled Jenny along, weaving between parked cars in a desperate bid for safety. "Where do we go?" Jenny gasped, glancing back at the figures closing in on them, fear mixed with determination in her eyes. "Over there!" Michael pointed toward a row of delivery trucks at the far end of the lot. They ducked behind one, pressing against the cold metal as they caught their breath. The footsteps slowed, and they exchanged anxious glances, hearts pounding in unison. "What now?" Jenny whispered, her eyes darting toward the shadows. "We need to figure out our next move," Michael said, trying to steady his breathing. "I can't let them take you." Jenny squeezed his hand tightly, her gaze intense. "I'm not going back to that life, Michael. I refuse." As they huddled behind the truck, Michael felt a rush of emotion. "I won't let that happen. I promised the police were closing in and their window of escape was shrinking." Suddenly, a loud voice rang out, breaking the silence. "They're over here. I saw them run. We have to move!" He glanced around, searching for any possible escape route. They could climb into the delivery truck, but would it lead to safety or trap them further? Before he could decide, the men rounded the corner, eyes narrowed and ready for confrontation. "You think you can just run away?" The lead man sneered, stepping forward. "You don't know what you're getting into." Michael stepped protectively in front of Jenny. "You don't scare us," he declared, though his heart raced with fear. "Oh, but you should be scared," the man taunted, pulling out a gun. The glint of metal sent chills down Michael's spine. "Stay back!" Michael shouted. "You won't hurt her!" Just then the sound of sirens pierced the night air, growing louder. The men hesitated, eyes darting between Michael and the approaching lights. It was a distraction, a chance to escape. "Go, now!" Michael urged, pushing Jenny toward the side of the truck. "I'll hold them off." "No, I won't leave you," she protested, her eyes wide with fear. "Trust me," he yelled, desperation seeping into his voice. "Just run!" Before she could argue further, Michael turned to face the men, heart racing. He knew he had to protect her at all costs. As the sirens grew closer, the men looked increasingly agitated. "Get out of here!" the lead man barked, glancing nervously at the approaching police. "We don't have time for this!" "Michael!" Jenny cried. Fear etched across her face, but he shook his head, knowing this was their only chance. With a sudden burst of courage, Michael charged at the men, trying to distract them long enough for Jenny to escape. The lead man aimed his weapon at him, and time seemed to freeze. "Don't do it!" Michael shouted. "You don't want this!" But the man's finger twitched on the trigger, and in that instant, a shot rang out. Michael felt the impact, a sharp pain blossoming in his side as he staggered back. He gasped, eyes wide with disbelief as he fell to the ground. "Michael!" Jenny screamed. She rushed back to him, kneeling beside him as blood soaked his shirt. "Go!" he gasped, struggling to breathe. "You have to get out of here!" But she refused to leave his side, panic flooding her features. "I can't! I won't let you die!" The sound of police sirens grew louder, and chaos erupted as officers flooded the scene. "Freeze! Hands in the air!" they shouted, weapons drawn as they rushed toward the scene. Michael felt the warmth of Jenny's tears on his face as she cradled his head in her lap. "Stay with me, please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the pain in his side intensifying. "I tried to protect you. You need to live, Jenny. Get out of here." Before he could say more, the officers descended upon them, their attention shifting to the men who had shot him. The criminals were taken down, but Michael felt himself slipping away, the world around him fading. As his vision blurred, he caught one last glimpse of Jenny, her face a mixture of horror and love. "I love you, Michael," she cried, her voice echoing in his ears. And then darkness enveloped him. The sound of sirens faded, leaving only the memories of what could have been. Jenny was taken away, the weight of their unspoken truths heavy on her heart. The world outside continued to spin, but for Michael, time had stopped. He had fought to protect her, but the cost had been too great. In that moment, everything changed, lives forever intertwined, destinies altered, and the truth buried beneath a shroud of chaos and love.